first question was, when why did white people start to think they were superior to blacks? And for my claim, I wrote down that I believe that slavery, or that discrimination is rooted in slavery and from the time that it started.
Yeah, I think I agree with Caitlin in the fact that it's rooted whenever slavery started, and then when they started to become a part of society as a whole during the Civil War times, and I think that's when the stigma that white people were superior was around.
Add on to that, I said, I don't really think there's a completely solid reason other than the color of their skin is the reason they treated them differently.
I agree with that answer.
Do you have anything to add?
I agree with both of you guys. Just because looking back at history, they're treated differently. Whites.
Robbie, do you have anything to add? What was your claim? Tyler, would you like to, or Caleb, would you like to share your claim?
Yeah, when they first came to the country as slaves, nobody really respected them.
I agree with that. That's kind of what I put down. Do you want to share evidence now?
I mean, yeah, I feel like the specific evidence isn't too hard to find in this scenario because it was just like, it was kind of in laws too, like the 3/5 of a man law, like that law, I forgot what it's called, but yeah, and that just kind of shows you the mindset that they were working with.
I agree with that, and to add on to that, in the story, the town of Macomb was very racist, I guess, throughout the whole book, but we know from American history that slavery was probably its roots, even before the book was placed.
To add on to the racism in the book, Bob Ewell really emphasized that Macomb really did not like black people, and he kind of set that point.
I agree with that.
Caleb, do you have anything to add?
No. Did you read your evidence?
I guess a little bit of evidence I remember was the fact that if Tom Robinson wasn't black, he probably wouldn't have ended up dying in that whole court thing. Like, that's a bit of evidence from the book.
Do we want to share some evidence from the world or personal experiences now?
I don't have any.
To tie the book and the world together, and the false accusations in our world, false accusations can ruin a person's life, like Bob Ewell did to Tom. And nowadays, people everywhere grow up with racism, and we can't seem to get away from it or stop it.
I agree with that. What I wrote down is we've learned many things in history class, including slavery. We've learned all about prejudices that date back all throughout history, but really spread in America at the beginning of slavery, which obviously started the discrimination against blacks in America and led up to all the Jim Crow laws and all of that stuff.
I agree with that.
Hunter, do you have anything to add that you can think of?
History and how they're treated today, so.
Can you think of anything, Robbie?
That racism has always been a thing, and it's kind of gotten better over time, and it's probably always going to be a thing until somebody steps up and tries to make a difference.
I agree with that. Until we can all come together and just. Atticus kind of, I think in the story, he stood up obviously for Tom, and I think that kind of it made a lot of people mad, but he was the one who really, I guess, tried to incite change.
Yeah, and I think in real life, when it comes to white people uniting together to try to make a change because of the fact they know it's not right. An example I can think of is when Harriet Tubman, in the Underground Railroad, that event in history, was aided by white people who didn't think it was right. In part, at least.
I agree with that. Do you guys have anything else to add that you could think of or relate to the story? Anything? Do we move on to the next question?
Yeah.
How can discrimination change perspective?
Yeah, but making people realize what they're doing wrong.
I agree with that and to add on to that. My claim was if you discriminate against certain people, you will start to think more highly of yourself than the people that may or may not be less fortunate or other races.
Add on to that, I said discrimination can change perspective by how you treat someone and how someone else treats someone. And I think when you learn more about the topic, you start to see more of it.
I agree with that. I think the better you're educated, the better you're yeah.
I think to tie it into the book, The Town of Macomb, the discrimination that you see there against the black folks is the fact that Tom Robinson got accused of a crime that he didn't commit, and that kind of shines through as how discrimination affects the way they've treated people, no matter what it is.
What I put for the evidence was many of the people in Macomb discriminated against others, and if you came from a place who didn't have any and if you came from like a place where you like didn't have any like discriminations against blacks, straight to Macomb, it could tremendously change your views, since everybody there is so like racist.
Add on to what I said earlier, I wrote for evidence that the first German Scout didn't know much about like racism and didn't think about it until their father got his case and went to trial, and everyone all kids their own age started to like bash them for that. They soon learned that just because of the color of someone's skin, they think it is okay to discriminate. During the case and before it happened, I think they started to realize that people are very mean to colored people. They do not understand that we're all the same.
Yeah, I agree with that. And if you personally reading the book and seeing how like this could be applied to real life, and that there might have actually been places like this, maybe there still is, but that just like kind of opens your eyes to the fact that the world it can be unfair, like groups of people of any sort. And
My idea is similar to CJ's, but I think that kind of like your perspective on like I guess could be like if you're obviously less fortunate, you're gonna think of things differently than somebody who had like a ton of money, because you're gonna value things higher, I think, and I think that can also relate to like being African American and being white, because if African Americans are like more oppressed than white people, then they're obviously gonna see things differently than the white people who aren't oppressed like the blacks. That makes sense.
what do you think, Robbie?
I think discrimination is a big problem because it's going back to people of maybe little kids that hear stuff in the news and they're going to school saying disgusting, mean things to colored people, and some people are coming up in the groups, and some people in sports, as you can see in the NBA on the back of their shirts, they're saying Black Lives Matter and everything else. Some people are taking a stand, and then other people are thinking this differently and making a big deal about it and being rude to the colored people.
I agree with that, Rob. That was a good point. Anna, do you have anything to say?
What about you, Caleb? What are you gonna say something like have to cut you off later? Alright, we all ready to move on? The next question here.
How can a family's perspective change how you look at someone else's? Change how you look at someone else.
Perspective as a family, this is my claim. Perspective as a family can be influenced by whatever your family's values are, like morally, you know. I forgot what I was trying to say.
I agree with you, CJ, and I think that since we're a product of the environment we grow up in, we tend to believe most of the things that our families say.
And on to that, I think families can brainwash you into thinking things that your conscience isn't necessarily thinking. And it's not just your family that can trick you, your friends and society can too.
Some evidence that I found in the book, was Scout and Jem were raised by Atticus, who is very much so less racist than others. So Scout and Jem learned that there was they understood that there was no difference between black or whites. However, the people like the Yules were obviously raised in a very racist household, so they were very racist and discriminative to African Americans.
Yeah, I agree with that. And another like sort of theme in the book is when Atticus stated several times that before you should judge someone, you should quote unquote walk, get in their shoes and walk in them. And that kind of shows you, like, if you don't understand why a person thinks a certain way, you can look at their family and, like, if you ever experience what their family's like and you know what their morals are, then you're going to understand more why they think that.
That was
Bill, what do you think?
Their actions around you.
Can you guys think of anything else that really tied this in from the book? Do we want to move on to some real world evidence? I put, since we all love our family and we're bound to listen to what they say, and because of this, we only hear one point of view, which is theirs, and are most likely only going to listen to what they hear. Because they have, I guess, the greatest influence on you for the most part.
For an example of your family brainwashing you, like considering like a political election, they might think or try to persuade you to vote for one president, while you might have other political beliefs and be opposed to voting for someone else.
Yeah, I think that, that ties into what your family's beliefs are can either cause you to believe that, or if you have any resentment, I guess, it can make you rebel against those beliefs. I think that happens quite a bit, actually.
I agree with that, CJ, because I guess personally, I have different beliefs than my family, and yeah. Do you guys have anything to say? Can you tie anything into your lives?
Well, usually in families, if, like Anderson was saying, political beliefs, if your family likes, let's say, Republicans like Donald Trump, usually most of your family will listen, and let's say Biden says something and you don't think it's true, but maybe other Biden supporters think it's true and they're going to not agree with Trump. It's going back and forth because a lot of Trump supporters are going to agree with Trump and not agree with Biden, and it's just going back and forth.
What does that have to do with, like, the family part, though?
I feel like a family is kind of a big part because usually in families, maybe you're wanting to believe in the same things because your family's believing in them, and you're not going to listen to the other person because they're, to you and to your family, they're not thinking the same way, and it's just doesn't feel right to you.
I think maybe in the story, Scout definitely thought differently than her family, especially her aunt, because I guess this isn't very, like, racial. It doesn't have to do with anything, like, racially, but she kind of is like a tomboy, and she likes to do things that her brother does, and she likes to play with, like, the boys. And so her aunt really didn't feel that way, and I guess that's kind of like a showing of like how Scout rebelled against her family in somewhat.
Very good. I like those connections. Okay, outside circle. What did the inside circle do well? Peyton?
It felt like trying to make others in, but it really felt like Caitlin was like a big facilitator. And I always relied back on her to ask the next question or the discussion back to another question.
True, but even so, they were, like you said, inviting people in, making sure that everybody had a chance to get their voices heard. Yes, very good. Okay, what else did we do well? How about connector statement? Easton? Go ahead.
So they used very strong words and had like evidence to back it up.
Yes, lots of evidence, and evidence from both the book and real life. Good, yeah. What else?
If I can add something,
Yes.
I'd like to say that I think we did a good job tying in the book evidence into the real life evidence and
Mhm.
that
I would
really
agree.
got back to the question.
I also
Yeah.
think we did a good job on agreeing with each other and tying each other's points together.
Yes, connecting and building on one another's ideas is huge.
The conversation went by really smooth. There wasn't really stopping points much. Right, Jeff, you adding and feeding on.
Yeah, you're becoming more comfortable with the flow of the conversation. That's fantastic. Okay, outside circle. What are some things that you'll want to keep in mind for your participation?
For everybody to speak up at points and not sit there and try to help state evidence.
Good, and stating evidence. Good. Alton?
Make sure anyone tries to connect because only about 3 people actually asked others.
Okay, so more connection statements and inviting connections. Is that what you meant to?
Yeah.
Or okay, yeah. So use those connection statements. All right. So very quickly and quietly change spots. Inside circles. Make sure you know what you're tracking on the outside. Get your literacy journals open. Start a new entry entitled Socratic Discussion Tracking. Did a great job, guys.
By one person. Felt like it took like 30 minutes. I felt like a long. Why don't we do the last thing then?
To be honest, I feel like
Wait, sorry, just
questions don't ruin.
Writing the points down.
what's that, Caleb?
Are we writing like
You can do just like a bullet point or numbered list. All right, everybody knows on the outside what you're tracking?
Yep.
All right, inside, round 2, you may begin.
What's this start?
This book is To Kill a Mockingbird, and our first question is when and why did white people start to think they were better than black people? And I really thought that went all the way back to like your ancestors and people before you that brought in how you viewed other people that have different skin tone or different anything compared to you.
Yeah, it's kind of that. Mine it's a little long, but it basically says that about 500 years back is when white people first had slaves. Slavery is basically like another tool for them, which means that like black people were basically just tools and they didn't do much. And then those people told their like grandchildren and their daughters and their family basically what black people meant to them.
I feel like the white people lived it back then took them for granted just to make money and not have to do the hard work.
And I really like how you both said like stuff about how they basically like that would make me connect to like their plantations and how like they only used them for work and slavery, and I just thought that whites just always thought they were privileged because like for example they moved Indians out of like Indians and Europeans out before, so they have land to do what they want to do and not really respect any of the Indians or anything that was actually there before. hand.
Well, I agree with all that, but I think it goes all the way back. Like, I think other races have always thought they were superior to every other one. Like, there's people have been owning slaves for like thousands of years, and I just think there's always been like second-class citizens in every single major country. And,
That's true. I mean,
That also.
What is your claim, Brian?
No, I don't agree with you. I think it started as from as long as we can remember, whether that be like ancestors or what Aiden said, like thousands of years ago or whatever. And I'm just gonna put.
Would you like to interject, Ryan, and say what you have to put down?
I agree with everybody in saying that we go back for generations. And other people have their opinions. White people don't give black people the opportunity to instead of privilege of other people that's white and others. And you can't get really for that.
Tyler,
I agree with Dalton. It started back when they became slaves and they were more around the society.
all right.
You want to go?
Well,
I'm
I
gonna
was just
start
going
with
to
the
say,
evidence.
should we go to the
Evidence. That's what I was.
about the book?
Yeah, you can start.
All right. So segregation started in 1849 and was in Killing Mockingbird. They had a side of town for blacks only, which at first, that white people still thought they were better and didn't want to live by black people.
I like that because that goes back to like a previous story that we read in like our literature, our like literature book that white book when they didn't when blacks started feeling like they were actually that was the Martin Luther King Jr. thing where they were like blacks when they started getting too good and then the whites didn't like it and then they started all fighting. But my evidence was one thing that shows social inequality in the book would be the Cunningham family, which they were presented in like the very beginning. And the Cunninghams, one of the poorest family in Macomb, they won't accept anything unless they can return it and trades or services or like work that they can do. So like the little boy, I think his name was like Walter or something at school. He didn't have any money for lunch, and they offered him money so then he could get lunch, but he wouldn't take it because he couldn't like return it. And that is like how his family always something he grew up with and being poor and how he had to survive like that. Because
Yeah, I agree with all that. My evidence is like how they took advantage of them in the past and why couldn't they just do it again. And probably it showed really well inside the trial part where they had the segregation sitting up top, the blacks sitting up top and the whites sitting down below, and the blacks didn't have much opinion. And basically, if I'm guessing that if the blacks spoke up, they'd probably just kick them out. And the jury always favored the whites because the blacks just didn't have rights.
yeah, I agree with that because like Macomb was a very racist town. County.
Yeah, and it was all old people, and old people they were with their ways of thinking that they were better than black people, and what's that saying? I can't teach an old dog new tricks. So then old people aren't going to change their ways.
What evidence did you find in the story, Aiden?
How I put like how well there was like the second half of the town that was and they had completely separate churches and stuff for the black people, and then they didn't really there was no like rich black people because they had like prejudice against them, so they really got held down and like couldn't advance in society or anything.
Yeah, I really like how you said that, but that makes me think about like the chapter when Atticus and Gemma, I'm pretty sure, went to Cal Mary's church, and they started acting different because of the blacks and the whites, I guess.
on to that, they said about the church that they would let the blacks use it on Sundays for church, and the rest of the week, white people would use it just for gambling and stuff.
What evidence did you find?
I agree with Aiden. They had the separate sides of town, and then what Easton said, they had the when they were in the courtroom, they had separate sides they sit on.
Did you find anything you like to present, Trina?
Yeah, I'm sorry myself. I got to what you guys watching.
Anything new you would like to bring to the conversation?
I was kind of like these things. It's just when Tom Robinson, he couldn't stand a chance because the jury favored the white, obviously, and so he basically had to accept his defeat, and he kind of already knew he was going to die because the jury favored the white.
Yeah, I like that because back in the day it was like black and whites, if they're like together, then that was a big deal, and like so one of them's either gonna get hurt or end up something.
Right, are we ready to go to the real world evidence? Just, you want me to start?
Yeah, you can start.
Alright, so real world evidence in the late 1500s, people used slaves as tools because they could be bought and it was almost free labor.
I have in the 1790s Neutralization Act that allowed only free whites to become citizens and European immigrants, but nobody else, like no blacks or anything else, just Europeans and whites, free whites.
I talked about how slaves, they were just treated around as tools, they're just free labor, and how today, current day, is not nearly as bad, but it is still around a lot. Like Black Lives Matter, there's a strong impact on that today.
I agree with Easton. They use them for money, and I forgot what I was going to say.
Alright, Aiden.
I put there was still discrimination against because there was white slaves, but they could like work off their like debts. Like after 10 years, they could be set free and they could like start a family. But blacks could never do that. They were slaves until they died. But the white slaves, they could like go start a life after a few years.
That on Aiden, like the apprentices, they would work for a certain amount of years, and the blacks weren't really considered as people, they were more considered property, and they were usually sold by more, how much work they could do.
And to add on to that, that makes me think like, what in the mind of like a human mind, what makes you think that why can't the black person go out after 10 years and work off all their debts or whatever they have to be just like the whites and be free whites and citizens of that certain area?
I get it. Black people to like get like a little money to like they do. So it's like they're used as tools, so they can't really do anything. So if they like try around a little bit like with trying.
Moving on to the next question. How can discrimination change perspective? I think that question right there, it kind of ties into your next question with how families' perspectives change. Because the way, like, I feel like the way you discriminate on a certain body of people is really influenced on by your family or how they view it, or your friends, just like your surroundings in general.
You know, the way that I said my evidence was the way that somebody responds to something, and like you respond, the way that somebody looks at something, especially like your role model or somebody you look up to, and they have a different opinion, that might change the way you look at it, and you just follow basically what they choose.
I like that to tie on to like the previous Socratic discussion with what Caitlin was saying. She was saying like how it can depend on like your wealth or like how the wealth ties into it. Can be similar to the African Americans and the whites, how they view each other?
My claim was discrimination means to disinclude people, which can make them hate you or be upset about not being able to do what other people do. So, I mean, like, that's a pretty big change in perspective if you're going to hate someone for not being able to.
I agree. Would you like to present your claim, Cody?
No, I guess that everything.
I will. The way that they look at people and how they treat other people may change their perspective on how they like treat or talk to them.
Can you elaborate on that a little more so we can better understand what you're saying?
Like if you're rude to someone, then it might change like a whole perspective on how you treat the like entire color of them.
Like the golden rule.
Treat others how you want to be treated. I like that. That was nice to connect it.
Well, I just put like, if you're raised a certain way by like your family and like you're like taught a certain way by like your friends and stuff, you're most likely gonna like basically train your kids like that too. And then that's how, well, really racism stays alive. It's like basically brought down by your family.
Yeah, that brought me to some evidence, like when Aunt Alexander came and she was like, she was set on her ways. No one's gonna get her off of that, and that's kind of like when Dalton was saying how you can't something about you can't teach old dogs new tricks, and it really brought me to that because of how she was so heavy on what she believed, and she wasn't really gonna accept anything that anyone else had to say about the racism and discrimination of anyone.
All right, are you ready for evidence?
Yeah.
I'd say it kind of refers to like real life when you take a person in your like friend group and they disagree or they're like you think they're more popular or smarter than you, that if they just you follow what they do. Say if somebody asks a question and you see that they didn't agree, you'll just go onto their side just to get more attention on it.
Yeah, because you don't really want to like.
The odd one out.
You don't. Yeah, you don't want to be the odd one out, or you don't want to just argue, or you don't want to just feel like you're gonna tear a friendship apart for saying what you actually want to, what you actually think or view on a certain topic.
One example from the book is when black people had their own church and they didn't really let very many white people come in. Plus, I mean, I doubt white people would want to come in anyways. But
Especially with the times that they were in and the city or place they were in, Macomb being so.
All right, I'm gonna wrap it up by asking one last question because I liked how you
15.
that was 15 minutes, yeah. How you connected a couple different times with that you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Do you think, especially when you connected it to Aunt Alexandra and how she was set in her ways, do you think the town of Macomb actually did learn a few tricks from what Abacus did?
I feel like they learn new stuff that will better them in the future, but I don't know if they were really ready to like jump right onto it and take actually what they need to do to take a step forward.
Okay, so tiny little baby step
Yeah.
move. Yeah, and that seems to be like what you had said before, many of you, how racism has been around since the dawn of time. That we're still moving forward a little bit at a time, little baby steps. Hopefully we can make some big steps sometime soon. All right, great job. Outside circle, what did the inside circle do well?
They did good at bringing people in the conversation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
making sure everyone was involved. Yeah,
I'd
good.
say it was a lot pretty balanced on the contribution.
Yeah, good.
They
whether there was some like disagreement and good evidence on why.
Yeah, and that makes the conversation deeper, richer, helps us to broaden our perspective and our understanding. Yeah, good. What else?
You tie each other's ideas together well.
Yeah, connected each of the ideas, and that's a huge part of building that collective idea or understanding is connecting each of those ideas to build their building blocks of our understanding. So awesome job. I'm so proud of all of you guys. Now what you need to do is to go to your reflection part, the very bottom of your page. Complete that. Remember to identify the specific person who had the claim that you feel is the most intriguing or interesting, and be able to really evaluate that person's point of view and your own strengths today and goals for your next Socratic discussion that will help. Okay, great job today.